Chapter 13. Empty Chairs. I knew immediately that he meant for me to go back in time again. I couldn't pretend stupidity. Even in a portrait, those eyes were disconcerting. And, considering the fact that I had just made things much worse for everyone, I ought to be relieved that he obviously thought there was a way to fix it. But instead I felt clawing fear. I did not want to go to the past again. I wanted to help. Yes, I did. The awful guilt still seethed in my bloodstream. But I made things this much worse with one jump. Imagine the damage I could do with two. I sat and fisted both hands in my hair. I do not know how he found out, the portrait said after a long pause. I do not believe that your parents ever discovered the truth, either. If they did, they never told me. Nor did they tell anyone else. My stomach nodded. The Order of the Phoenix. We were lucky that he thought the time travel was used for all the wrong reasons, he continued. He could not possibly understand that your parents and uncle had lived in a world where he had been defeated, but such a high cost that they were willing to fight him all over again. He thought they were refugees from a future in which he reigned, and when he was in the place to kill your father, to attempt to kill him, excuse me, he thought nothing of it. The fact that Harry was a Horcrux was kept from him. Thank Merlin. I nodded jerkily. It was a good thing. I was glad that Voldemort had been defeated. But the lack of knowledge as to how Grandma and Sirius and Uncle Charlie and Albus and Severus had died, it was ominous. My fault. I don't think I can do it, I said quietly. For one, I can't go back to the same memory dash. I'm aware of that, he said pleasantly. I have a portrait in the Department of Mysteries. Adam Black has been most informative. Now, continue with your excuses. It's not just an excuse, I said loudly. I clenched my fist and winced at the burn. I made one jump, and look at what I destroyed. Voldemort found out about the effing time travel. I believe that it might have been a number of things that led to his discovery, the portrait said. I don't believe that just your presence did it. Your father was never skilled at occlumency, for one. Voldemort could have plucked the knowledge out of his head, and, combined with the changes you made in the past, he was able to do the arithmetic. Voldemort was prodigiously intelligent, after all. These small things are what you would change, not the big things, not like attempting to divert prophecy. And how am I to know what's a small change and what's a big one? I asked. It's impossible. I just make things worse. He stared at me. I felt the weight of it as I had in the past. He was measuring me, and he was not yet sure if he found me lacking. But that was all right. I found my own self lacking. On the day Harry, Ginny, and Ron arrived from the future, they revealed Peter Pettigrew as an animagus, he said quietly. Sirius was freed. Pettigrew was locked up, but not for long. He escaped a year later. To be perfectly honest, none of us were worried. I listened, almost hypnotized. I knew this story. Dad had saved his godfather from Azkaban the day he'd returned last time too, but had not made much of a difference. Pettigrew returned to Voldemort with a tale of how he had been captured by a boy who had not known of the magical world. And yet the boy had known enough to reveal him as an animagus. Had mentioned Sirius Black and his innocence, the portrait said. Don't blame Dad, I said, suddenly outraged. He did everything right. It was me who effed everything up. Make no mistake, he said. A fair bit of the blame rests on your shoulders. Had you not come back, Voldemort obviously would never have been given enough pieces of the puzzle. But your father made mistakes. I made mistakes. Your mother made mistakes. And your Uncle Ron made mistakes. And your task will be to erase the pieces of the puzzle that you can, so that your own mistakes are hidden in the darkness and never come to the light. I'll just make more mistakes, I thought hopelessly. Again, he appeared to read my mind. I trust that you have learned your lesson. You won't get drunk and pass out on the floor of a bathroom after spilling huge secrets to a crowded bar. A note of warning. Something was wrong with what he had just said, but I couldn't quite place it. I stared at him, mind whirling. The thought of wreaking more havoc in the past made me feel physically ill. My stomach pitched and rolled. If I did make another jump, who else would die because of me? Who else would become a dark hole in my memory? Dad and Mum would survive, of course, at least long enough to conceive me. More uncles? Would Granddad die as well? I looked down at my hands, lingering on the jagged wound that marred my palm. I did not want more deaths on my hands. I need to think about it. I said helplessly. The family home in Godric's Hollow was empty, but I knew immediately where else to look. It dimly registered that today was Sunday, which meant that I ought to have just gone to the burrow in the first place. I'd wasted time operating to Mum's house in the first place. I rolled my eyes and turned on the spot. My first thought upon seeing the burrow, a favorite place of childhood wandering with my brother and sister and cousins, was that already it was different. It seemed sadder, gloomier. It even appeared to stand up straighter. Stop being so dramatic, I told myself. But I couldn't really help it. Guilt wasn't exactly a foreign sensation. After all, I'd treated Emmy Wilder-like. My thoughts halted abruptly. Why in the name of Merlin did I feel guilty about that Wilder cow? Except, this body had never received a firm rejection in front of practically everyone in the Three Broomsticks. I had never invited her to Hogmeade in my 4th year, right after Dad had died. I'd gone with her, but I hadn't tried to kiss her. She hadn't pushed me away after 30 seconds of blissful oblivion. And I hadn't spent the next 3 years at Hogwarts loving her and hating her in almost equal measure. The cold refrain, "Don't fucking use me as a distraction," Potter, did not march through my head in opportune moments. Instead, I had different memories, equally awful. I didn't like what I saw, didn't want to face them, so I distracted myself by entering the burrow and shouting hello. "Well, if it isn't little Al," said Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred. I gaped at him. On the one hand, I'd never met him. On the other, I had a lifetime of memories of him being my favorite uncle after Uncle Ron. He was lively, hilarious, and made such an effort to bring light and laughter to the family that it had taken years for me to realize that, for him, it was an effort. He'd made happiness seem so natural that it wasn't until I'd come across him holding his son George and shaking with sobs that I realized that some of his laughter was probably faked. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Al," he said. He reached over and ruffled my hair fondly. "The opposite of a ghost," I said before I could stop myself. I immediately laughed it off. He gave me an odd look. "How's the store?" I asked quickly to change the subject. "What store?" he asked. I stared at him. I'd sort of just assumed that he'd be the true owner of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Uncle Percy had never liked it. Not really. But Uncle Fred worked for Magical Sports and Games. He always got James and Lily, who were interested in those things, prime tickets to Quidditch matches. And Uncle Percy ran the shop, and he and Uncle Fred rarely spoke to each other at family gatherings. I wondered why. Did Uncle Percy dash? But Uncle Fred did not finish his question, much to my relief. "Al," Lily shouted. She nearly knocked me over with the force of her hug. "Mum's hacked off at you," she warned. "Where were you? We haven't seen you in ages. You should go see her. She's in the kitchen, helping Aunt Fleur with dinner." James brought his girlfriend of the week. She rolled her eyes and started pulling me into the dining room dash. And she's awful, but they all are. I was grateful for her constant stream of chatter. It saved me from having to say anything on my own. Instead, I stared at the mantelpiece, mind whirling. Tiny people in wizarding photographs waved at me. Dad, Grandma Weasley, Uncle Charlie, Sirius Black. At one point, Cousin George toddled in, and I absent-mindedly picked him up when he demanded it. My wound throbbed viciously, but I ignored it. And when Mum came in and hugged me tightly and then began demanding to know where I'd been and giving me disapproving looks when I couldn't tell her, I tried to ignore that too. My family sat around the huge table piled with food that Grandma Weasley hadn't made. They laughed and made jokes and chattered about inconsequential things. But I couldn't help but see the empty chairs. I sighed and looked down at the palm of my hand. I imagined that I could already see a second scar, a phantom brand.